What happens when America's favorite country star finds himself in the most uncomfortable interview of his career? What you're about to witness is the moment Blake Shelton reached his breaking point on live television, leading to one of the most shocking exits in morning show history. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below because this story gets more intense with every word spoken. Blake Shelton walked onto the Today Show set with his usual confident swagger, flashing that trademark grin as he settled into the guest chair across from Jenna Bush Hager. The studio audience erupted in applause, clearly excited to see the country superstar. Jenna smiled warmly, shuffling her note cards as the cameras rolled. "Blake Shelton, welcome back to Today," Jenna began, her voice bright and cheerful. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here with us." "Thanks for having me, Jenna." "Always. Love being here," Blake replied, adjusting his position in the chair, seemingly relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be another routine promotional interview. Jenna leaned forward slightly, maintaining her professional demeanor. "So, Blake, let's jump right in. You've had an incredible year, but there's been quite a bit of chatter online about some of your recent comments regarding the current state of country music. Some fans are saying you've been pretty critical of newer artists. Care to elaborate on that?" Blake's smile faltered just slightly, though he tried to maintain his composure. "Well, Jenna, I think there might be some misunderstanding there. I've always been supportive of new talent. I mean, look at my time on The Voice. I've helped launch so many careers." "Right, but specifically there was an interview where you mentioned that today's country music lacks authenticity. You said, and I'm quoting here, that some of these new artists wouldn't know real country if it hit them in the face. That's pretty harsh, don't you think?" The studio fell silent as Blake shifted uncomfortably. His jaw tensed slightly, and he took a breath before responding. "I think my words might have been taken out of context there, Jenna. What I was trying to say is that country music has roots, traditions that should be respected." Jenna nodded, but her expression remained serious. "I understand that, but when you have the platform you do, don't you think comments like that might discourage young artists who are just trying to find their place in the industry?" "Look," Blake said, his tone becoming slightly sharper, "I've been in this business for over 20 years. I think I've earned the right to have an opinion about the direction of country music. And honestly, I don't think wanting to preserve the integrity of the genre is a bad thing." The tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Jenna pressed on, clearly prepared for this line of questioning. "But Blake, isn't music supposed to evolve? I mean, even your own sound has changed dramatically since you started. Are you saying evolution is okay for some artists but not others?" Blake's eyes flashed with irritation, though he still tried to maintain his media-trained composure. "That's not what I'm saying at all, Jenna. There's a difference between evolution and completely abandoning what makes country music in the first place." "Okay, but let's talk about specifics," Jenna continued, her journalist instincts taking over. "You've worked with artists like Gwen Stefani, you've crossed genres yourself. How is that different from what these younger artists are doing?" "Because I paid my dues," Blake snapped, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I spent years playing honky-tonks and county fairs before I ever thought about experimenting with my sound. These kids today want to skip all that and go straight to the pop charts." Jenna raised an eyebrow, sensing she had struck a nerve. "So you're saying there's a hierarchy in country music? That newer artists need to prove themselves to veterans like you before they can be taken seriously?" Blake rubbed his forehead, clearly frustrated. "You're twisting my words, Jenna. That's not what I said. I'm just trying to understand your perspective, Blake, because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're gatekeeping an entire genre of music." The word gatekeeping hit Blake like a physical blow. His face flushed red, and he leaned forward in his chair. "Gatekeeping? Are you serious right now? I've done more to support new country artists than most people in this industry." Jenna remained calm, professional, but persistent. "Have you, though? Because there are several artists who have gone on record saying they felt discouraged by comments from established stars like yourself. Name one, Blake challenged, his voice rising slightly. Well, there's the situation with Morgan Wallen, Jenna began. Oh, come on, Blake interrupted, throwing his hands up. Don't even go there. That's completely different. How is it different, Blake? You publicly criticized his approach to country music, said he was more concerned with Instagram followers than actual songwriting. Blake stood up abruptly, the microphone pack on his belt crackling. This is ridiculous. I came here to talk about my new album, not to be ambushed about every opinion I've ever had. Jenna remained seated, her composure unshaken. No one's ambushing you, Blake. These are legitimate questions about statements you've made publicly. As a journalist, it's my job to ask about these things. Your job? Blake laughed bitterly. Your job is supposed to be entertainment, not trying to destroy someone's reputation on live television. The studio audience was dead silent, sensing the interview spiraling out of control. Camera operators glanced nervously at their directors, unsure whether to keep rolling. Blake, I think you're over. Blake fumbled with the microphone pack clipped to his belt, his hands shaking slightly from anger. The studio lights seemed hotter now, and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Jenna watched him with a mixture of concern and professional curiosity, realizing she might have pushed too far. Blake, please sit down, she said, her tone softening slightly. Let's just take a breath and continue the conversation. Continue the conversation? Blake repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What conversation, Jenna? All you've done is attack me since I sat down. I haven't attacked you, Jenna replied firmly. I've asked you direct questions about things you've said publicly. There's a difference. Blake finally managed to unclip his microphone, holding it in his hand like a weapon. You ambushed me. You brought me on this show under false pretenses. I was told this was going to be about my new music, my tour, maybe some fun stories from The Voice. Instead, you turned it into some kind of interrogation. The producer in the control room was frantically gesturing to the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the drama play out. The studio audience sat frozen. Many, holding up their phones to record what was clearly becoming television history. Blake, Jenna said, standing up now as well, you're a public figure. When you make controversial statements, you have to expect questions about them. That's how this works. Controversial statements? Blake's voice cracked with disbelief. I gave my opinion about music, about an industry I've been part of for decades. Since when is having an opinion controversial? Since your opinions affect real people, Jenna shot back, her own patience wearing thin. Do you have any idea how many young artists look up to you? How much weight your words carry? Blake tossed the microphone onto his chair, the thud echoing through the studio's sound system. So now I'm responsible for everyone's feelings? I'm supposed to watch every word I say because somebody might get their feelings hurt? When you're in a position of influence? Yes, actually, Jenna replied, crossing her arms. With great platform comes great responsibility. Oh, spare me the Spider-Man quotes, Blake snapped. This is the real world, Jenna, not some comic book. People say things, other people disagree. That's called life. Jenna's eyes flashed with irritation. You know what? You're right, Blake. This is the real world. And in the real world, when you publicly dismiss an entire generation of artists, you get asked about it. When you suggest that success should only come after paying some arbitrary dues that you get to define, you get challenged on it. Arbitrary dues? Blake's voice was rising again. You think playing dive bars and county fairs for years, building a fan base one person at a time, learning your craft, that's arbitrary? No, but thinking that's the only valid path to success is, Jenna countered. Music has changed, Blake. The industry has changed. Just because someone finds success differently than you did doesn't make their success less valid. Blake ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling to maintain any semblance of composure. "You don't get it. You're not a musician. You don't understand what it means to watch something you love get watered down and commercialized beyond recognition." "Then explain it to me," Jenna said, leaning forward. "Help me understand instead of getting defensive and angry." "I'm not getting defensive," Blake protested, though his defensive posture suggested otherwise. "I'm getting frustrated because you're not listening to what I'm actually saying." "I am listening, Blake. You're saying that new artists don't respect country music's traditions. You're saying they're taking shortcuts. You're saying they don't deserve the success they're finding. Am I wrong?" Blake stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working silently. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter but no less intense. "Some of them, yeah. Some of them are more interested in going viral than writing good songs. Some of them think putting on a cowboy hat makes them country. And some of them have never even heard of Hank Williams or Patsy Cline." "And that bothers you," Jenna observed. "Of course it bothers me," Blake admitted. "Country music means something. It's about real stories, real emotions, real life. It's not about auto-tune and manufactured personas." Jenna nodded slowly. "Okay, I can understand that perspective. But Blake, don't you think every generation of country artists has probably felt that way about the next generation? Don't you think there were older artists who said the same things about you when you were starting out?" Blake's expression darkened. "That's completely different." "How?" "Because I came up the right way. I learned from the masters. I studied. The greats. I didn't just show up and expect to be handed everything." "But Blake," Jenna pressed, "you were signed to a major label pretty early in your career. You had advantages that a lot of artists don't have. How is that different from a young artist today using social media to build their fan base?" "Because social media isn't real," Blake exploded. "It's all fake, manufactured garbage designed to trick people into thinking something is popular when it's just algorithm manipulation." The studio fell silent again, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Jenna blinked, clearly taken aback by his vehemence. "Blake," she said carefully, "that's a pretty sweeping statement. Are you saying that any artist who uses social media to promote their music is fake?" Blake realized he had stepped over a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I'm saying that real talent doesn't need gimmicks to succeed. Real talent speaks for itself." "Like your collaboration with Gwen Stefani?" Jenna asked pointedly. "Was that real talent speaking for itself? Or was that a gimmick to reach a broader audience?" Blake's face went completely red. "Don't you dare bring Gwen into this." "I'm not bringing her into anything, Blake. I'm pointing out what seems like a contradiction in your thinking. You collaborated with a pop star. You know what, Jenna?" Blake's voice was eerily calm now, a dangerous quiet that made everyone in the studio tense up. "I see what this is really about." Jenna frowned, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "This whole thing," Blake gestured, wildly around the studio. "This isn't about country music at all. This is about you trying to make a name for yourself by taking down someone who's actually accomplished something in this industry." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Jenna's professional mask finally cracked, revealing genuine hurt and anger underneath. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Blake continued, his voice getting stronger with each word. "You're a morning show host, Jenna. You read teleprompters and do puff pieces about cooking and celebrity gossip. But now you think you can sit there and lecture me about an industry you know nothing about." The studio audience gasped audibly. Several crew members looked shocked, while others pulled out their phones, knowing they were witnessing something that would be all over social media within minutes. Jenna's composure finally shattered completely. "Are you kidding me right now? Blake? I'm a journalist. I've been doing this for years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners. And now you're stuck doing morning television," Blake shot back cruelly. "Must be tough falling that far down the ladder." The words hit Jenna like a physical blow. Her face went pale, then flushed red with anger. "How dare you?" "I dare because it's true," Blake said, now fully committed to burning every bridge in sight. "You brought me on this show to try and destroy my reputation so you could have your little gotcha moment. Well, congratulations. You got your viral clip." Jenna stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. "I brought you on this show to promote your album, Blake. You're the one who turned this into something ugly." "I turned this into something ugly?" Blake laughed bitterly. "You spent 20 minutes trying to paint me as some kind of monster who hates young artists. You twisted every word I said, took everything out of context, and when I tried to defend myself, you kept pushing and pushing. I asked you legitimate questions about your public statements," Jenna fired back. "If you can't handle being questioned about things you've said, maybe you shouldn't say them in the first place." "Or maybe," Blake said, stepping closer to her, "journalists should actually practice journalism instead of ambush tactics designed to create controversy." The producer was now frantically signaling from the control room, but neither Blake nor Jenna seemed to notice or care. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every heated word. "Ambush tactics?" Jenna's voice cracked with incredulity. "Blake, these questions were based on interviews you gave willingly to other outlets. If you consider being asked about your own words an ambush, then you have a serious problem with accountability." "Accountability?" Blake's voice rose to nearly a shout. "You want to talk about accountability? How about taking accountability for turning what was supposed to be a friendly interview into a character assassination?" "Nobody assassinated your character, Blake. You did that all by yourself with your own words and your reaction to being questioned about them." That sentence hit Blake like a punch to the gut. For a moment he stood there speechless, the full weight of what was happening finally sinking in. He looked around the studio, seeing the shocked faces of the audience, the crew members with their phones out, the cameras still rolling, capturing every moment of his meltdown for posterity. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "Absolutely unbelievable." "Blake," Jenna said, her voice softer now, perhaps realizing they had both gone too far. "Maybe we should just take a commercial break and—" "No," Blake cut her off sharply. "No, we're not taking a commercial break. We're done here. I'm done." He started walking toward the edge of the set, then stopped and turned back to face Jenna and the cameras. "You want a story, Jenna? Here's your story. This is what passes for journalism these days. This is what happens when entertainment shows pretend to be news programs. You don't want to have conversations. You want to create drama. You don't want to inform people. You want to get clicks and views." Jenna stood frozen, unsure whether to try to salvage the interview or just let him go. "And you know what the really sad part is?" Blake continued, his voice breaking slightly. "There are real issues in country music worth talking about. There are real problems with the industry that deserve attention. But instead of having that conversation, you decided to turn this into a circus." "Blake, please." Jenna tried one more time. "Let's just sit down and—" "I said we're done," Blake snapped, cutting her off again. "I'm not sitting down, I'm not finishing this interview, and I'm not pretending this was anything other than a setup. From the beginning." The studio was dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the quiet whir of the cameras. Blake looked directly into the main camera, addressing the audience at home. "To anyone watching this who actually cares about country music, about real artistry, about honest conversations instead of gotcha journalism, I'm sorry you had to witness this. This isn't what I came here to do." He turned back to Jenna one final time, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried more weight than all his shouting. "And Jenna, I hope this gets you whatever it is you were looking for. I hope the ratings spike and the social media buzz, and whatever career boost you thought you'd get from this was worth it. Because you just burned a bridge with someone who's been nothing but respectful to this show and to you personally for years." Jenna opened her mouth to respond, but Blake held up his hand. "I'm not done talking," he said firmly. "You had your turn to ask questions. Now I get to make a statement. You want to know what's wrong with the music industry? It's not the young artists. It's not the changing sound or the social media marketing or any of that. It's people who don't understand the industry thinking they can sit in judgment of it. His words were coming faster now, fueled by anger and adrenaline. Blake took one more look around the studio, his eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of the audience, the crew members still filming, and finally landing on Jenna, who stood frozen in place, her face a mixture of shock and defiance. You know what the worst part about all this is, Blake said, his voice now eerily calm. I actually respected you, Jenna. I thought you were one of the good ones in this business. I thought you actually cared about having real conversations with people. Jenna found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. Blake, I do care. That's exactly why I asked those questions. Someone in your position has influence, and with that comes responsibility. There's that word again, Blake said, shaking his head. Responsibility. You keep throwing that around like it means something. But what about your responsibility? Jenna, what about your responsibility to be honest with your guests? To not misrepresent why you're bringing them on your show? I never misrepresented anything, Jenna protested, though her voice lacked conviction. Really? Blake pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly. Because the email your producer sent my manager said this interview would focus on my new album, my upcoming tour dates, and maybe some fun behind-the-scenes stories from The Voice. There wasn't a single word about dissecting my views on the country music industry. The studio audience murmured among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. Several people in the front row were openly filming with their phones, despite posted rules against recording. Jenna's face flushed red. Plans change, Blake. News develops. That's how live television works. News develops? Blake's laugh was harsh and bitter. What news, Jenna? What earth-shattering story broke between yesterday and today that suddenly made my opinions about country music the most important thing to discuss on morning television? Jenna struggled for an answer, opening and closing her mouth several times before finally speaking. Your comments have been generating discussion online. Our viewers deserve to hear your response. Our viewers, Blake repeated mockingly. Right, our viewers. Not your producers looking for a viral moment. Not your network executives hoping for a ratings boost. Our viewers who just wanted to hear about new music and ended up witnessing a public execution instead. The control room was in complete chaos. Now, producers were screaming into their headsets, unsure whether to cut the feed or let the drama continue. The director kept signaling for commercial breaks, but neither Blake nor Jenna seemed interested in stopping. Public execution? Jenna's professional facade finally crumbled completely. Blake, you're being ridiculous. I asked you questions about your own statements. If you can't handle defending your positions, maybe you should reconsider taking those positions in the first place. Defend my positions? Blake stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Jenna, I shouldn't have to defend having an opinion. I shouldn't have to justify caring about something I've dedicated my life to. And I certainly shouldn't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who wouldn't know authentic country music if it walked up and introduced itself. The insult hit its mark. Jenna's eyes filled with tears of rage and humiliation. Get out, she said quietly. What? Blake asked, momentarily taken aback. I said get out, Jenna repeated, her voice stronger now. Get off my set. Get out of this studio. You want to leave? Then leave. But don't stand there and insult me. Insult my profession, and insult my integrity just because you can't handle being asked tough questions. Blake stared at her for a long moment, then slowly began to clap. There she is, he said, applauding mockingly. There's the real Jenna Bush Hager. Not the polished morning show host, not the diplomatic interviewer, but the person who gets nasty when someone calls out her tactics. My tactics? Jenna's voice cracked. Blake, you're the one who turned this into a personal attack. You're the one who made this ugly. I made this ugly? Blake stopped clapping and pointed directly at her. You ambushed me on live television, tried to make me look like some kind of bigot who hates young artists, and when I defended myself, you kept pushing harder. You made this ugly the minute you decided to abandon the interview we agreed to and turn this into some kind of gotcha journalism experiment. The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself might crack. Fine, Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying throughout the entire studio. You want to paint me as the villain here? Go ahead. But everyone watching this will see exactly who lost their temper, who started throwing personal insults, and who turned what could have been a meaningful conversation into a tantrum. Blake nodded slowly, as if he had been waiting for her to say exactly that. You're absolutely right, Jenna. Everyone will see. They'll see the footage. They'll see who was asking honest questions and who was trying to create controversy. They'll see who remained professional and who resorted to personal attacks. And most importantly, they'll see who was honest about their intentions from the beginning. He walked toward the edge of the set, then stopped and turned back one final time. And when they see all of that, I think they'll have a pretty clear picture of what really happened here today. I think they'll understand why I couldn't sit there and pretend this was anything other than what it really was. Which is what, Blake? Jenna called after him, her voice breaking. What do you think this really was? Blake looked directly into the main camera again, addressing the viewers at home rather than Jenna. This was a reminder that not every interview is a conversation. Not every journalist is interested in the truth, and not every question is asked in good faith. Sometimes people bring you on their show not because they want to hear what you have to say, but because they want to tear you down for their own benefit. He started walking again, heading for the exit, but Jenna wasn't finished. Blake Shelton, ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. A man who can dish it out but can't take it. A man who thinks his opinion is above criticism, and his reputation is above questioning. Blake stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment it looked like he might turn around and continue the fight. The entire studio held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Instead, Blake just shook his head and continued walking. As he reached the edge of the set, he pulled off the remaining audio equipment and dropped it on a nearby equipment cart. Good luck with your ratings, Jenna, he called back without turning around. I hope this was worth it. And with that, Blake Shelton walked off the Today Show set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a shaken host, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about moments in morning television history. Jenna stood alone on the set for several seconds, the cameras still rolling, unsure of what to say or do next. Finally, she looked directly into the main camera. Well, she said, her voice barely steady. That certainly wasn't what any of us expected this morning. The control room finally managed to cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. In a matter of minutes, clips of the confrontation would be spreading across social media, analyzed and debated by millions of viewers who witnessed one of the most explosive celebrity interviews ever broadcast on live television. What started as a simple promotional appearance had devolved into a career-defining moment for both Blake Shelton and Jenna Bush Hager, a reminder that, in the age of social media and instant reaction,